Have you ever felt magnetically pulled towards someone you barely knew? A connection so intense, so electric. It didn't make sense. But you couldn't look away. It felt like fate. Like something ancient was waking up inside you. But soon, the magic turned to chaos. The passion became pain. And you were left wondering, why do I always fall for the ones who hurt me? Carl Jung would say, you didn't fall in love with them. You fell in love with your own shadow. Because sometimes, the most toxic relationships aren't accidents. They are mirrors, reflecting the parts of ourselves we've rejected, buried, or feared to face. And until we meet those parts within, we will keep meeting them in others. We don't fall for the person. We fall for the part of ourselves we've lost. It begins quietly. You meet someone, and something inside you remembers them, even if your mind doesn't understand why. You feel drawn, not just to their smile or their words, but to something deeper, an invisible thread between your soul and theirs. You tell yourself it's love. But love, real love, grows slowly. This is different. It's intense, immediate, consuming. And here's the truth Jung uncovered. You're not falling in love with them. You're falling in love with a piece of yourself that you abandoned long ago. Maybe they are free, bold, emotional. And you've spent years being careful, quiet, controlled. Maybe they carry fire and you've lived in ice. Or maybe they hurt you in ways you thought you'd healed. That magnetic pull isn't chemistry. It's your shadow, the forgotten, repressed parts of you, coming alive in their presence. You crave them, because your psyche craves wholeness, not from romance, but from integration. But here's the danger. When you chase the lost part of you through someone else, you give them power over your healing. You make them the answer to a question that was always inside you. And when they leave, it feels like you're being torn in half. Not because you lost them, but because you lost the reflection of a part of you you still haven't reclaimed. The shadow seeks completion, not compatibility. We grow up believing that love is about compatibility, shared interests, similar values, aligned goals. But the unconscious doesn't care about any of that. Your shadow, the hidden side of your psyche, isn't looking for peace. It's looking for expression. It wants to come out of the dark and into your life. And it will use love to do it. So instead of choosing someone kind and stable, you might find yourself obsessed with someone chaotic, unavailable, or even dangerous. Not because they're good for you, but because they activate you. They awaken the wounds you've buried. They stir the fears you've silenced. This is not your heart choosing. It's your shadow calling. The parts of you that were never allowed to feel, to speak, to rage, to desire. They finally see a chance to come alive through this person. So love turns into a battlefield. You argue, you chase, you withdraw, you collapse. But beneath it all, the unconscious is doing what it always does, trying to make you whole. It doesn't care about harmony. It cares about integration. And until you bring those rejected parts back into your awareness, you will continue to be drawn to people who embody what you've disowned in yourself. Unhealed feminine energy in men attracts controlling or chaotic women. Carl Jung believed that every man carries within him an unconscious image of the feminine, his Anima. She represents his emotional world, his intuition, vulnerability, creativity, sensuality, and the longing for deep connection. But in many men, this inner feminine is repressed. They're taught to be strong, logical, detached, to suppress softness, tears, and longing. And when the Anima is buried inside, she doesn't disappear, she waits. And when she stirs, she doesn't knock gently, she storms. A man with an unhealed Anima may find himself repeatedly attracted to women who are wild, intense, or emotionally unpredictable. She fascinates him. She awakens something forgotten. But she also overwhelms him. because she reflects the chaos within him that he never dared to face. He may try to control her, fix her, escape her, but he cannot escape what she represents. His own unlived inner life. The relationship becomes a battlefield between his need for control and her symbolic role as his forgotten soul. He thinks it's her that causes the chaos, but really, she's a mirror of his own unintegrated anima. And until he meets this feminine energy within himself, he will keep finding her in women who hurt, confuse, or overpower him. Unhealed masculine energy in women attracts cold or emotionally unavailable men. Just as every man carries an inner feminine, every woman carries an inner masculine, the animus. He represents her logic, her direction, her voice of reason and power. He's the inner structure that helps her act, speak, and stand in her truth. But what happens when that inner masculine is wounded? Many women inherit an animus shaped not by truth, but by criticism, neglect, or emotional coldness. Maybe from a distant father, or a society that taught her to be hard in order to be safe. So the animus becomes harsh, judgmental, punishing. He tells her she's never enough. He silences her desires. He pushes her to perform, achieve, control. And in the outer world, she begins to attract men who mirror that same cold energy. They are distant, dismissive, emotionally shut down. She tries to love them into warmth, but always ends up feeling invisible. Why? Because her psyche is externalizing the inner masculine wound. She's not just trying to get love from him. She's trying to heal the animus inside her. But the healing won't come from chasing unavailable men. It begins when she meets that voice within and starts to transform it. When she softens the rigid thoughts. When she listens instead of judges. When she creates instead of controls. Only then can she meet a man who reflects her wholeness, not her hurt. Toxic attraction is chemistry between two wounded archetypes. It feels like fire. You meet them and something inside you explodes. The conversations are electric. The stares linger too long. The connection is undeniable. You call it chemistry, but it's not chemistry. It's the collision of two unconscious wounds. Carl Jung taught us that we don't just fall in love with people, we fall into patterns. Patterns shaped by childhood, by our inner feminine or masculine, by our shadow. When those inner patterns are unhealed, we attract not from our highest self, but from our most wounded parts. That's why it feels intense. That's why it feels urgent. Because it's not about the present moment. It's about the past calling for resolution. Maybe your inner child is looking for the parent who never stayed. Maybe your suppressed anima wants to feel seen. Maybe your unbalanced animus needs to speak again. So your soul draws in someone who activates the pain, in the hope that you'll finally pay attention to it. But pain is not love. Chaos is not passion. Obsession is not destiny. And if you confuse wounding with romance, you'll keep calling your suffering fate. The truth? It's not fate. It's a mirror. And that mirror won't break until you look into it and see yourself. Healing polarity is the path to real love. When the inner feminine and inner masculine are at war, you will search for peace in all the wrong places. In lovers who confuse you, in stories that repeat, in fires that burn but never warm. But when you begin to heal that polarity within, everything changes. You no longer chase chaos to feel alive. You no longer call the wound your soulmate. You begin to recognize yourself in your triggers. You begin to respond with awareness, not reaction. The anima in you softens. The animus finds his true voice. The shadow becomes an ally, not a curse. And with each inner shift, you attract differently. You love differently. You live differently. Real love stops being a high to chase and becomes a space to rest. A sacred mirror. A quiet sanctuary. A place where your soul is not completed, but welcomed. So if you found yourself stuck in toxic patterns, if you've loved deeply but always ended up in pain, don't ask, why did they hurt me? Ask, what part of me needed to meet this wound? Through them? Because healing doesn't begin when they change. It begins when you turn inward. When you marry your inner feminine with your inner masculine. When you call your shadow home. When you stop outsourcing your soul to another. This is the inner union Jung spoke of. Not a fairy tale, but a return to wholeness. And from that wholeness, you won't just find love. You'll finally be ready for it. If this message resonated with something deep inside you, if it helped you see yourself with more compassion, or offered a light in the dark corners of your heart, we invite you to support this space. Like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing soulful reflections for those walking the path of self-discovery and inner healing. Your presence here matters, and your journey is sacred. Thank you for being part of this unfolding.